conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to this brief video on a major event happening, particularly in KAMITIC ancient Egyptian astrology on October 9th, 2025. And the event is, I will show here with the astronomy software, the Aten, what we call the sun here, the Aten, is going to cross this yellow line here. And if you can follow it with my cursor here, you'll see it says in white, kind of a little blurred in, Supergalactic Equator. So this yellow line here is the supergalactic equator of the galactic clusters. And I'm going to now zoom in and show you what's happening on this date, October 9th, 2025 at 8:09 p.m. Let's zoom into the Aten, the sun here, and get a sharper image of what's really going on here. Okay, let's really zoom in to great magnification. And there you have it. You see here, this green line is the ecliptic, the path that the Aten takes in his boat. And this yellow line, you can see clearer here, is the supergalactic equator. And we see here the front disk limb of the Aten is about to connect with that line. And this is all happening, as you saw, in the wrist of Virgo, and happens every year around October 9th, 2025, and 6 months later. But what I want to, you can see Virgo again here. Here's Virgo with the wheat shaft here, and Spica, the little wheat. Now, the ancient Kamau made this a very clear message to look at, because in the Dendera zodiac, this line, this seam cutting the ceiling of stone in half, is the same thing as that yellow line. This is the supergalactic equator. And you see here, this is Virgo right here, and there she's holding that wheat shaft, and it's near her wrist right here. Okay, so this dividing line from thousands of years ago shown is the same line as the yellow line here, the exact same line, the supergalactic equator. Not the galactic equator, but the supergalactic equator. Okay, now that we have that established, let's look at a chart. We can change this, actually, this time, but it doesn't really matter because the sun will still, I wanted to have a sunrise chart here where the sun's in the first house. But you see it's about 22 degrees. Oh, this is the wrong date. Let me change the date here. Let me just do this very quickly. It should be October 9th. Let's apply that date. Okay, there we go, 2217. Okay, so we see here that on that date, October 9th, the time doesn't really matter. It's more the day. The Aten is in 22 degrees Virgo. So every year, when the Aten is around 22 degrees Virgo, it's crossing the supergalactic equator, the wrist of the Lady of the Wheat. Now, this happens in an area of the sky that is, we call it Dwamutfe and Shai. Dwamutfe and Shai. Dwamutfe is a god of the canopic jars of your tummy. He's a jackal-headed canopic jar. But this section of the sky, which are known as nakshatras, we call Kabesu, is called Dwamutfe, and the Jyotishi, the people of Jyotish astrology, call it Hasta Nakshatra. Hasta Nakshatra. And that nakshatra deals with the hand. It's called the hand, and it deals a lot with, look here, a hand, the hand of Virgo, literally. So I teach chakras, and the way one way I teach chakras is through the stars. So this part of the sky deals with certain chakras, which I won't go into right now, but I'll mention that the meaning of this area of the sky is that it is the time when the Kamal marked celebrating their great architectural and artistic works and wonders that were based upon the grid of Ma'at, what's called the canon of Ma'at. That's why all Kemetic art looks the same for thousands of years. It looks very, very similar. That the art forms did not change. They were very stable, except for the weird Akhenaten heretic age and a little age during the Sais priests. But for about 5,000 years, the art was remarkably stable. Why is that? Because it was all based upon a grid system, a sacred holy grid system. Here we have a Google search for the Egyptian canon of proportions. So you can always find these online. And I picked a few pages that are particularly clear. This grid that controlled all Egyptian art, all architecture, was based upon an 18 height grid, 18 squares to the grid. If you count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. But what you say, there's a 19th layer. The Kamal did not count it as 19 squares. They counted it as 18 squares. And they would always draw on a standing figure. The 18th square would also always cross the hairline, right by the eyebrows and the hairline. This 18 was very important because, as you see here, it links to a bunch of phi ratios, 1, 2, 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. These phi sequences, these phi golden ratios. Here we had the length of a cubit. The whole grid is based upon what's called the cubital arm or the royal arm. And a cubital arm was the distance from the elbow to the tip of the thumb, about 18 inches. And then we have 18 squares. So that number 18 becomes significant. I'll explain why in a minute. And so what they would do is measure, they would proportion the hairline, the neck area, the elbow area. They would proportion various parts of the body of the figurine according to certain standardized XY points of the grid. So again, the hairline's always at the top of the 18th square. Okay. The foot is 3 squares, totals 3 squares. And also what's called the 2/3 ratio of the cubital arm. So 2/3. If you think of the cubital arm as from the elbow to the thumb, okay, the 2/3 measure was 2/3 of that. And it was equal always to 3 squares. So basically, from your elbow to your wrist was called the 2/3 measure or the 3 squares measure. And if you're able to, if you're sitting down, if you're able to take your foot and place your heel right by make your arm to a right angle, place your heel towards the bend in your arm, you see your foot, your toes end at about the same place as your wrist. So there are these ratios of proportions that the length, the 2/3 ratio, which is from elbow to wrist, is the same length as your foot on your body. And both those body segments, the elbow to wrist 2/3 ratio, which is 2/3 of elbow to thumb tip, the elbow to wrist ratio is the same length as your foot, and both of those were shown to be drawn within 3 squares. Okay? So, These numbers become key because the 2/3 ratio, the elbow to wrist or the back to the front of the foot, was called 2/3 because that links to the perfect fifth frequency in music. Okay, those who know music harmonics know that the perfect fifth has a frequency ratio of 2 to 3. Okay, so they use these numbers. They have a 19 square grid, but they call the 18 square grid. They had 3 squares from elbow to wrist or from foot to toe, but called the 2/3 ratio. They will use these other labels because they're highlighting 2/3 is the ratio of the perfect fifth in music, the most stable sound in music. 18 squares relates to the amount of breaths you take per minute when you're at rest. You breathe about 18 breaths per minute when you're at rest, which equals 72 pulses of your heart in 1 minute. And the earth moves every 72 years back 1 degree in precession. So we're tying in the breathing mechanism of 18 breaths per minute to be self-similar to an 18 square grid. That this grid somehow plugs into the breathing power, the breathing mechanism of the human being. And the 2/3 nomenclature of elbow to wrist, 2/3 of elbow to thumb ratio, ties you into music, the perfect fifth, the 2/3 ratio. The song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, twinkle twinkle, that harmony, dum la 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 la, that jump is a perfect fifth. It's a very solid, soothing, balanced sound. And there's a lot more to this. I don't want to go into too much technicality with it. But the point of the story is they would proportion their art to these organic ratios that we find in nature, in the human body proportions, for one goal. They knew that art puts people into a trance. A trance is a programming state, a state of high suggestibility. And they wanted their art to only program divine energy to the life force. These ratios of 18 square grids and proportion them to biometric ratios of talking about the perfect fifth in music as an art form to translate into architecture, to translate into sculpting, to translate into drawing and painting. They're saying one message: celebrate how art's power can put the people into a trance towards divine harmonies, divine ratios. A lot of the evil in the world is due to the bastardization of art, where people can just do art whatever way they want, however they want. It has a certain freedom, of course, for people, but it has a very dangerous side effect. It can awaken all levels of your spirit. It can open to all kinds of spirits and downloads of beings, spiritual beings, demonic beings that you call art, but are actually very destructive to the society that observes or hears what came from those dimensions. So on the supergalactic equator day, Hasta, what we call Shai or Duamutfe star cluster, is when we celebrate the return and the expansion of this canon as a divine sacred art form for all artisans. I teach how to use this sacred 18 grid square and apply it to sculpting, to music, to dance, to poetry, to architecture, to jewelry making, to clothes patterns, designs on the clothing. They kept repeating this harmonic ratio sequence in every single form of art and self-expression. And What we want to do on the 9th is to pray for, celebrate for, and I'll give you the words of power to help this to happen. It's Ong, Jung, Jahung, Nyung. Ong, Jung, Jahung, Nyung. Ong, Jung, Jahung, Nyung. You chant that on the 9th, and you want to pray for the return of sacred art, the Kemetic sacred art, the Kemetic canon of proportions, which would compel the citizens' spirits to vibrate at harmonic frequencies and not dissonant frequencies. We don't understand a lot of the Earth's problems come from art being misused. Whether it's movies, writing, theater, music, drawing, sculpting, building, painting, all of these things have an influence on your psychology, on your moods, on your behavior patterns. And so that is the meaning of this holiday. I pray that you enjoyed this brief introduction to it. One day we will have big festivals on October 9th, where we have the great artisans come forth and present their works of genius and inspiration of reviving the Kemetic art form and their sculptures, their paintings, their drawings, their jewelry, their textile designs and patterns. And we're going to revive in North America with the October 9th festival of the great Canon of Ma'at. This is called the Canon of Ma'at. Ma'at was the goddess of measure, harmony, balance, order. But one of her symbols was a kind of plinth platform. Okay, and I can show you very quickly. Let's see here. Ma'at plinth. Let's see if it shows up. It doesn't show up here, but let's see if we can get it here. It's this kind of platform that she stands on, or that the god, here it is. This is a good image of it here. This blue and gold shape here is called the Ma'at plinth. It is the symbol for the cubital arm from elbow to thumb, and it's about 18 inches. I mean, elbow to wrist, about 18 inches. 18 inches from elbow to thumb is about 20 inches. Okay, and that's the 2/3 plinth. Okay, so divine order is based upon this 18 grid. I wish to also mention about the 18 grid. I said that if you're at rest, the average human breathing rate is 18 breaths per 1 minute per minute. That means you have 72 heart rates or 72 pulses in 1 minute. And 18 to 72 is 1:4 ratio. And the Earth spins every 4 minutes 1 degree. So this 18, which contains 72 pulses of 18 breaths per minute, 18 to 17 ratio is 1:4. And 1:4 is the ratio of the Earth's rotation on its axis 4 degrees every 4 minutes 1 degree. Okay, so with that, I wish you a very happy October 9th, where you get a handle on the revival through your craft, your genius, your creativity in making art that follows Ma'at, the canon of the 18. We pray that you enjoyed this, and remember, in my world, it is all love, and I wish for all of you to be surrounded by the wings of love of the goddess of the universe, Our Lady Nut. Dwawend Hotepu.